Math time with Miss Hartzell, Module 8, Lesson 4. I can use attributes to identify different quadrilaterals, including rectangles, rhombuses, parallelograms, and trapezoids.
Well, I am just so impressed with your dedication and motivation to get your work done online. You have this week learned about shapes, and then specifically you learned about polygons. Remember that polygons are shapes that are two-dimensional. They are made up of using only straight lines, and they are closed shapes. So there's no opening in polygons. They are closed. Every line meets with another line that is straight, and it creates a polygon. We learned that some polygons are named triangles, some are called quadrilaterals, some are called pentagons, which have 5 sides, and hexagons, which have 6 sides or 6 angles. Today, we are going to really just focus on quadrilaterals. This group of polygons is very complex, but there are some really cool ways for us to distinguish or tell the difference between different quadrilaterals. So during your pause and think, you're going to be thinking about that word quadrilateral. What did you learn about this word yesterday? And there'll be an image of some examples of some quadrilaterals in case your brain forgot. Use the images to remind yourself. And then we're going to talk about the special words that we use for quadrilaterals. So remember when I warned you on Monday, there's a lot of different vocabulary words to learn when we are talking about shapes and polygons. So if your brain is starting to feel a little crazy, don't fret. It's okay. I understand that you're learning a lot of new words, and that's okay to feel any way that you're feeling. Just remember to do your best and don't give up. You got this. All right, get started with that pause and think. Thinking about what is a quadrilateral? What does that word mean? Do your best today.
So before we start identifying quadrilaterals, just pause and think for a moment and remind yourself, what is a quadrilateral? What did you learn about yesterday about quadrilaterals? Take a look at these examples that are on the screen. When you're finished thinking about this word, you may press play. So we know that there's a lot to learn when it comes to shapes. And there's a lot of vocabulary that you've been learning about. So I'm going to review some words and I'm going to teach you some new words. When two lines meet and they create almost like an L shape, that is called a 90-degree angle. So if you recall on Monday when we had our math lesson, when two lines came together, we used this symbol to show that 90-degree angle. We drew kind of like a little square in the corner of that angle, okay? Because that angle is 90 degrees. And if you're having trouble understanding 90 degrees, take a look at a piece of paper. The corners of a piece of paper are 90 degrees exactly. So if you are wanting to understand this angle, look at a piece of paper. This is important because as we are learning about special quadrilaterals, we need to know this information because some quadrilaterals are made up of entirely 90 degrees, 90-degree angles. But there are some quadrilaterals that do not have 90-degree angles, and that makes them a different kind of shape. So please try to remember this word, 90-degree angle. The other vocabulary word that we are going to be using today is our parallel lines. parallel lines are two lines that are next to each other that will never ever touch. So if I extended either of these lines forever into space, these two lines would never ever touch. Just like the lines on a road. If you look out on your street, or if you look next time when you're out in the car with your family, take a look at the two yellow lines on the road. Those two yellow lines are parallel lines. No matter how far the street is, no matter how far the highway is, those lines will never meet. So we call those parallel lines. This information, both 90-degree angle and parallel lines, are really going to be important today. So I wanted to take that moment to review this so that you can better understand the different types of quadrilateral shapes or polygons. So let's get into that work. And we're going to start with a familiar quadrilateral, rectangles. Rectangles have lots of names. We can call them polygons. We can call them shapes. We can call them rectangles because they have 4 sides, 4 angles. All of their angles are 90 degrees. So when you're looking at a rectangle, each angle is 90 degrees. So you are able to create that special symbol because if I took a piece of paper, like the corner of a piece of paper, and I held it up to this shape, they would be the same angle because they are both 90 degrees. Rectangles also have 4 vertices, 4 points where the lines meet. And there is a special type of rectangle called a square. Squares are special rectangles because the sides are all equal. But this does not mean that a rectangle can't be a square. A square can be a rectangle. We can call it a square or we can call it a rectangle. It's a special type of rectangle. But not all rectangles are squares. If the sides are not equal, then that rectangle is a rectangle, a quadrilateral, or a polygon. It is not a square. And all rectangles have 2 sets of parallel lines. So if I take a look at this shape and I extend the sides using my imagination, those sides would never meet. So this side and this side, if I can extend the sides, these 2 lines would never meet. Just like the other 2 sides, if I extended those lines, those 2 lines would never meet. So these shapes have 2 sets of parallel lines. Let's take one more look at another example of a rectangle with 2 sets of parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that are never going to touch. So if I extend these 2 sides with using my imagination or using a pencil, then you can see there's one set of parallel lines and here's the other set of parallel lines. And that is true for all rectangles, including squares. If I extend these sides, these lines would never meet. Okay? So that's your rectangle. 4-sided, 4-angled. Your angles are 90 degrees. Special rectangles that have equal sides are called squares. And rectangles have 2 sets or 2 pairs of parallel lines. Moving on to the next quadrilateral, a rhombus. Now for the rhombus, we're going to talk about those other angles that are not 90 degrees. An acute angle is an angle that is less than 90 degrees. We call those acute. Angles that are more than 90 degrees are called obtuse. So this quadrilateral is called a rhombus. People also call this a diamond. Sometimes people confuse rhombuses and squares. They do look very similar. But what's different about a rhombus is that the angles are not 90 degrees. When you are looking at a rhombus, you are looking at angles that are either less than 90 degrees or more than 90 degrees. So rhombuses are not squares. They are rhombuses. They have 4 sides. All sides are equal in length, so that's similar to a square, but the angles are not 90 degrees, so that makes it different from a square. The angles are either acute, meaning less than 90 degrees, or they are obtuse, meaning more than 90 degrees. They do have 4 vertices, and rhombuses do also have 2 sets of parallel lines. So if we extended the sides of a rhombus, the sides, 2 pairs of the sides would not meet. So that's what makes a rhombus a rhombus. Now we're going to talk about parallelograms. So you may have noticed that the rectangles were parallelograms and the rhombuses were parallelograms. And that's true. Parallelogram, this word means just that when we are looking at a polygon, it has 4 sides, 4 angles, 4 vertices, and 2 sets of parallel lines. So that's true about a square. Although squares do have 90 degrees, we can call it a parallelogram as well because the sides are created with 2 sets of parallel lines. Same thing for rectangles. They have 1 pair and 2 pairs. So when you're searching for parallel lines, they come in a pair, okay? Just like a pair of socks, just like a pair of shoes. You need to have 2 lines to have a pair of parallel lines. To have a set of parallel lines, excuse me. When you are finding more than 1 set of parallel lines, if you have 2 sets, then we call that type of shape a parallelogram. And this is a pretty classic parallelogram where the angles are not 90 degrees, but because it does have 4 sides, 4 angles, 4 vertices, and 2 sets of parallel lines, we call it a parallelogram. On to our last quadrilateral that we are going to study today. These are called trapezoids. Trapezoids, because they are quadrilateral, do have 4 sides and do have 4 angles. But the angles of a trapezoid are not 90 degrees. None of these angles are 90 degrees. The angles are either acute, less than 90 degrees, or obtuse, more than 90 degrees. And trapezoids are different from the rest of their quadrilateral friends because they only have 1 set or pair of parallel lines. So trapezoids are not parallelograms because they don't have 2 pairs of parallel lines. They only have 1 pair or 1 set. Because if I did try to extend the sides of this trapezoid, they would eventually meet. Therefore, trapezoids only have 1 set of parallel lines and they are not considered parallelograms. So I know that we've talked about a lot of different words over the past couple math lessons, and it's okay if you're feeling a little confused. The knowledge of polygons can be a little overwhelming. There's a lot of words and a lot of information to take in. So hopefully this diagram can help you at least visualize quadrilaterals. So quadrilaterals really just stand for any four-sided, four-angled shape. There doesn't have to be any special thing about the angles or the sides of just that fact that there are four of them. Okay, that's what makes a quadrilateral a quadrilateral. Four sides, four angles. When we have specific attributes like right angles, then we can take those quadrilaterals and call them by different names. We also can call quadrilaterals different names by our knowledge of parallel lines. So when you're looking at this diagram, you can see that it splits up into three places. A place where there's only two parallel lines, okay, like a trapezoid, we only have two parallel lines here. And over here, we did not talk about this shape, so don't worry too much about it, but a kite is technically a quadrilateral, but it does not have any parallel lines. So really, we can only call a kite by the word kite or quadrilateral. And then for our shapes in the center here, these are all parallelograms. So they can be called by a quadrilateral because they have two pairs or two sets of parallel lines. We also can call them parallelograms. And then rhombuses are special because they have equal sides. That's why you see these lines here. They're showing that the sides are equal, but the angles are not 90 degrees. Okay, so they are not squares. And then a square is a square because it has 90-degree angles, and all of the angles are 90 degrees, and all of the sides are equal. Okay, so that's what makes a square a square. So technically, a square could be called a square, a rectangle, a parallelogram, or a quadrilateral. Squares have lots of different names. Rectangles also have a few different names. We know that a rectangle is a rectangle because it has four sides, four angles, and the angles are all 90-degree angles. So we can call a rectangle, or we can call it a parallelogram, or we can call it a quadrilateral. Okay, so again, I understand that there's a lot of vocabulary when we talk about shapes. I will include this diagram in your work today without all the extra notes. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. Those notes won't be distracting to you. However, I hope that it can help you just kind of visualize how these shapes are and are not connected. So just do your best today, and hopefully some of this information is not new to you. And if you are curious or having trouble understanding, please join me for my math hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:30. And the link to those meetings are in your Google Classroom, or if you are in my classroom, you can just ask me, or you can ask your teacher, and they will share that information with you, okay? Because we don't want you to be confused or, go ask your parents, because we know your parents are busy. So if you really are confused and you really are interested to learn more, please reach out and ask us, and we will do our best to help you. So, if you do think that you are ready, keep going and do your daily practice. Again, I will include that diagram of the quadrilaterals to kind of help you visualize and see how these different shapes can really be called different names, okay? But you have to be paying attention to their attributes. You have to look for those angles. If there's 90 degrees, you know what type of shape it could be. If the angles are less than 90 degrees or acute, or if they're more than 90 degrees, obtuse, then we are going to call them by different names. And if you see parallel lines, two lines that could go on forever, then you know that shape could also have a special name. So a lot of information. I know that it might be tricky, but you can just do your best by trying and seeing what you remember. So I believe in you, so I hope that you do your best and you give it a try. Have a great day.